There it goes. Okay, we are discussing how our wonderful um, team of therapists and related providers here at the Lartey Wellness Group um, deal with issues related to absentee fatherhood, and that could be both part-time or full-time. And one of the recommendations from one of our therapists has been a gratitude tree for kids to look at what they're grateful for in in addition to worrying about their father not being around. That's not to replace having a father. So I would add that we have to help the kids deal with what they feel like they're missing, which is a grief and loss issue. And there are resources for many overlapping issues, which are dealing with blended families and divorce, families of divorce. Certainly there are resources for children with grief and loss issues, and also working with kids in the foster care system, and their resources. Anybody else here work with, just maybe raise your hand if you've dealt with kids in foster care. Anybody else besides me?
Yeah, I worked as a foster care worker for my internship back, when I was still in grad school. It's kind of sad to say, but absent fathers was just so prevalent back then. I don't think we really thought about it. It was just, okay, we work with what we have. And I'm trying to think if there were any surrogates that, that we worked with. I mean, you had the foster parents, of course. And if you had a 2-parent household for fostering, that was kind of an anomaly. And this was in Prince George's County. So I can't really, I don't know. I don't really have anything to add because people just kind of kept going. And
Good morning, Miss Lori. Good morning, everybody. I want to introduce myself because this is my first time being here. Yeah, my name is Jonathan Romero. I'm one of the intern therapists with you guys, and at one of the places I'm volunteering at, and we have we're kind of like on a break for a second, so I won't be here long. But I did want to key in on something. It's crazy how Chelsea said something that I was going to ask a question about, which is your point of view or understanding about surrogate fathers. It's like she said the word. I'm like, I think I'm about to come up here and use something that's not commonly stated, but Chelsea pulled it right out, and I'm like, dang it. But that's what was on my mind about surrogate fatherhood, because what I understand is like a lot of cultures, particularly like African cultures, African American cultures, they have like godmoms or godfathers, and it's like because they are like parents are working or they're busy or they have a certain type of kinship system or some sorts where it's to avoid neglect. It's to help for parent who maybe have some type of mental health disorder or something of that. I just want to see like the effectiveness of it and ways to like implement that, or kind of like usher a child into identifying a effective male figure or some type of mentor in a way where it's one where they're like, it's not because they think they're cool, because some cool people have some negative traits about them, but someone who has some actually characteristics worthy of learning from, those type of things.
I'm going back into my memory, and we had male social workers, and they weren't just in the Department of Social Services, but they were in some of the other agencies and organizations. And I do recall that when it was that one time a month visit for this very large family that I was working with, the worker from the sister agency was a man, and he and I would get the kids together at the mall. And he was there. He was like the father figure, I guess, for a few hours for these children. They did do family finding, where they would find any blood relatives that were connected to the children. And I think that was very helpful in terms of finding those father figures. So yeah, even though it's been a few decades, I'm remembering it now. So sorry, it took a while for it to load up. But yeah, I think the things you mentioned, Jonathan, helped me to jog my memory. Yeah, what else was there? I don't know. Sorry, I'm hearing a big echo now. Yeah, I mean, there are different community organizations, I think, that try to do things.
Big Brother used to be real popular. We would mention that.
Yeah, that was popular. I guess I don't know how active it is today, or if they have enough people out there that are volunteering in that way.
I think that you could find some places that volunteer, like certain. So I went to I'm at an HBCU, and then I went to more state. I know that there's some volunteers where you kind of have to like take the academic route, but extracurricular route, like fraternities and things like that, where they're doing type of academic kind of things, where it's not just about the academics, but it's about the those kind of like interpersonal connections, or showing how to socially engage with others and things like that, and peer leadership and things like that.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, so we can go back to Stacy or anybody else, but that's only one part that, the reason I was thinking of the ACEs study, adverse childhood events, and every counselor needs to know about that if you don't, because it really, and there are many, many studies that have come out of that. And thanks, Jonathan, for raising your hand. I'm glad you might know about that. But if you have too many adverse childhood events in childhood, it can stick with you really, really long term into adulthood. And so the kids who an absent father is one of those adverse events. Going through divorce is one of those adverse events. Being in the foster care system could be another adverse event. So what I have seen in terms of counseling adults as well, when I've done a lot of couples counseling, which we've seen here, is that, that male role model that you were talking about, Jonathan, is so important, because in couples therapy, we really need to talk about gender roles, which gets really confused these days because of gender fluidity. But if you have a typical couple, even then you have gender role stereotypes, and people don't know, well, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a husband? And I've asked, the adults, Well, who were your role models? And if they didn't have good role models, it's hard. So and I want to give Jonathan a chance to talk. I want to throw out a couple more ideas just for you to think up. The reason why I brought up the foster care system and Chelsea asking about moms is when I was doing counseling with the kids or some family therapy for kids who were removed from their parents and looking at definitions, what does it mean? I looked at the idea of full-time parent versus part-time parent. And just because a parent is part-time doesn't mean they can't love you. And so kids who would have visits with parents and would act up before and after, sometimes even the social worker or counselor would see that as a sign they shouldn't have a visit years ago. And it's just because of the transition difficulties. And that's in the counseling that we would have to help them and drill down to see what is the issue. Is it the transition or something happening bad? So looking at that full-time versus part-time parent, and then the same thing, looking at that part-time parent who may have been ADHD and didn't know how to be reliable to show up for a visit. But that, again, doesn't mean they don't love you. It means they have their own issues. And so those were some of the counseling issues that I needed to deal with the families. Jonathan, go.
Okay, so I'm gonna leave in a few minutes, but I want to have some things to keep in mind. Right, it's interesting how kids was punished basically for bad behavior when they was probably attention seeking behavior. And negative behavior, negative attention is better than no attention, right? But one of the things I wanted to say and keep in mind about one, we're social creatures. We're social creatures by nature, and boys and men tend to congregate around each other, and they usually congregate around each other for work or objective. So a lot of men bond over work. A lot of men, they associate and are around people relevant to, goals or accomplishments, whether it's prestigious or delinquent, leading to the idea of the reason why even like fraternities or gangs are built or made. Fostering repetitive. It's a certain type of behavior. What's the word? What's considered success, or in a community or socioeconomic class and stuff like that. What is considered rewarded behavior and how to achieve within that space. So usually that immediate person is usually a father or uncle figure. If not, it's a community figure and things like that. So trying to figure out how to foster manhood or social participation, or I forgot the term that Adler said, is significant. And the other part, when you spoke on gender roles and things like that, understanding that in this, I had to understand gender presentation and things like that. I think other ways or words to kind of make it a little bit more inclusive is individual social function. Because one thing I had to start considering and realizing that, we talk about gender roles and things like that. We talk about family, and when we talk about family, we talk about children. And one of the things is being fertile. Well, all men and women aren't fertile, one. So it's like, how do a woman find purpose, or how do a man find purpose in a family when they are infertile? And then you think about, elderly or older people, or people going through menopause. So it's like, if people who aren't fertile can find place and purpose in the situation, how come people who are presenting or opt out to not have children, or don't have children, or can't have children, find purpose in their community and things like that? So it's something I want to think about to say, because gender roles is very contentious kind of way of thinking about things, because it's culturally nuanced and everybody have different type of ways to identify themselves that kind of make them kind of squeamish or triggered when they hear that. So just something to think about. But I'm gonna be leaving in a few seconds.
Jonathan, we're so glad to have you with us. We, you know, as you've noticed, this staff meeting for people, who don't like to, maybe they're rolling out enjoying staff meeting in their pajamas for a change, or they don't have to, you know feel like they have to be face forward, and that's just gotten to be a habit for our staff meetings here. I'm old school, but and I try to recreate staff meetings so I have my face up. But we really do appreciate the participation, and you brought up a lot of issues. And so I would love to hear from others. You talked about how gender roles can be, one of the things you had just said was gender roles being maybe a little bit controversial in how we present it in counseling because of it being culturally based. But we do get a lot of bicultural and mixed cultural people, and who deal with that. Jules.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I think everybody that knows me knows that, I worked in anti-child sex trafficking in this very, very intense capacity. So I have a little bit of a different perspective where it comes to parents and fathers in particular. In Anne Arundel County, I saw a lot of fathers, also mothers, who were sex trafficking their kids. And often when CPS was involved, I felt like the approach was nonsensical because often those kids said, hey, I don't want anything to do with that person ever again. And because of the Deborah Donaldson initiative, there's such an impact, well, I won't say impact, but such an emphasis on reunification that the child's voice was minimized and silenced, and they were forced into, this reunification plan that wasn't in their best interest. So I think I also try to hold space for that too. Like the presence, at least from my vantage point, the presence of a dad depends on who he is, how he shows up. Is he a protector? Is he somebody that's empowering that child, who is helping that child to feel stronger in the world? Or is he somebody who's taking away from that child? For me, it really depends on the dynamic. And I think for me, that's the main thing that I try to think about, where the client is. Does the client want anything to do with that person anymore? And what happened? Are we talking about run-of-the-mill kind of family dynamic stuff, or are we talking about major life traumas that were ongoing for years and years? So that's something I always like to think about.
I was just saying thanks, Jules. And trauma is another one of those ACEs study things. It really is very traumatic if you have incest in the family. I've also seen a lot of stepfathers who are abusers and moms who are so overwhelmed and think the stepfather is going to be a good father figure, but didn't vet him very well for her children. And it can work both ways. Jonathan.
So I wanted to say this, and I'm gonna leave. I think, Jules, that's an excellent observation because it's a valid statement that some men come into people's lives and they freeload and they're bums, for colloquial term. And I think identifying exploitation, people who exploit, men and women, fathers, mothers, but right now we're talking about fathers being exploitive of their children. Trafficking has become a fancy word for slave and slaving and things like that, and how people use their children for labor and sexually and all those other things of nature that you was working with. And I think it's important to find that, because another way of looking at exploitation is pimpery and things like that. And it's a very ugly, perverted thing when a parent pretty much, in grosser terms, pimp their children out, which is, again, an ugly word to use, but that's what it seems like it is. And I don't know, that's the most, when you say that, it makes me think about that, and how really ugly that is, and how hurtful it is to basically be a parasite of a family.
I had one family here at Lartey. There were no parents.
Mm.
The children were being raised by grandma. And, that's a particularly difficult kind of setting. Grandma's doing all she can, working, loves her children, the grandchildren, but the family, they were suffering a great loss because the mother died in a timely way at a very young age. And the father was just, I don't know, unknown or in the wind. That one sticks out to me. I can't say that a lot of other ones do. But that's just another dimension. It's not just one parent, but both parents that are gone.
Another grief and loss issue.
Yeah.
And I'll throw even another monkey wrench, just food for thought out. Well, I got the idea that Stacy was talking about families with kids, how to help kids deal with absentee fathers. But you're also going to get adults who are still reeling from absentee parents. And sometimes you get parents who are reeling from absentee kids, adult kids, because things go in cycles. Society goes in cycles. There's been talk, the past 20 years, have you ever talked, about the me generation? And there's been so much emphasis, even in counseling, that you have to take care of yourself and individual autonomy and the importance of taking care of yourself. And a lot of adults come in for counseling and say, I was raised by a terrible mom. I was raised by a narcissistic parent. And we have to be careful. We want to validate the feelings of our presenting issues that clients give us. But if they are labeling their parent without the parent being there, we don't want to necessarily buy into that. We want to look at what made them think that, and how are they suffering if they cut their parents off. And sometimes you might get a parent who lost their children. Their children got taken away, and then the children are angry. So there's a lot, whether you're dealing with kids or you're dealing with adults, loss and cutoffs in families, unless there's abuse, like Jules was talking about. Unless there's horrible abuse, loss in families, it's, and cutoffs, we've got to address that. Even if there was horrible abuse, like sometimes kids will run to their abuser, and we have to take a look at that. There's a good book for dealing with estrangement. You're looking for resources. There are a lot of works by a man named Joshua Coleman. So I'll write that down on dealing with estrangement. And there's another one called Walking on Eggshells, and which is good for, and it could be estranged from a peer. I do recall, just to give a nod to what Joel said, when I worked in foster care, reunification, because of all that loss and because in the foster care system, sometimes there's a shortage of good foster parents. There's some good ones, but there are a lot of people who unfortunately go into it for the wrong reasons, that they think just love is going to cure the kid. And love and prayer, and it does not always work. So or the part-time parent issue was one that I believed in, because sometimes that was important. So that just, and to have cooperation between foster parents and biological parents if you don't have an abuser. Trying to reunify abusers too quickly was terrible. But there was only one time because of all those family issues that I had to testify for termination of parental rights. And kids can languish in the foster care system without the rights, because of what Jules was talking about, and with such a push on reunification. And that's not good either for kids not ever having a permanent family and languishing. But there was only one time that I felt like there was a kid that was languishing too much, and I testified for that mom's rights to be terminated. So anyway, Jules, what do any more comments about, terminating parental rights? I have seen it do well when you've got somebody who's an abuser.
Yeah, I don't have so many comments on that. I will say this though, when, because my theoretical orientation is often feminist therapist, right? When we go back to that ACEs study, I think it was 1998. To me, it's important for us also to look at the ways that the patriarchy has been internalized within our professions. To look at how, what was that study was conducted by 7 men and 2 women, something like that. So there, it was very imbalanced in its construction and its constitution, and also in the things that it looked at. I don't think it was really very qualitative at all. I think more it was drawing this inference between presence of male, presence of trauma. And so for me, there's a lot of confounds in it. I can't hear you, Laurie.
I appreciate you bringing up the changing dynamics and culture, just like cultural bias and IQ testing that from years ago. And we always have to look at the multicultural issues and what's culturally relevant and what needs updating. In a similar way, there used to be a scale for addressing how stressed and anxious you ought to be. It was called the Holmes-Ray scale. And if you experienced a certain number of items on this checklist, then you must be doing badly. But it turned out to not be very valid or reliable. You have to use it with a grain of salt just to say what's relevant for you.
Okay, so in particular, these kids that I'm mentoring, their brothers, dad's involved, but he's also when I talk to the boys, they're upset because they don't feel like he's taking part in going to doctor's visits or important events. They feel like, he's mean to them, not necessarily anything he'll say things like, nothing mean or traumatic or anything like that, but the boys feel like they want certain toys, you know what I mean, and dad's not receptive to getting the right toys, or they want them to talk to dad, or they, like dad says, you should talk to me, I'm your dad, when he calls, right? But the boys are like hesitant to want to talk to him. And so they perceive that as him being mean.
Mm.
So how do you work through that with a child?
Only comment I would have with that, with like working with kids, is just trying to have them see, at that age, you can't really like control what dads do in a sense, and trying to help them figure out how do they maneuver around that. Because you can't force dad to do certain parent roles, and it's just accepting what dad does in a sense.
Right. So we've talked about boundaries. You can set boundaries when you feel like you don't want to talk to dad necessarily, if he calls, or, recognizing feelings, journaling how you're feeling, expressing to dad how they feel through letters, through writing down what they would want from dad. The gratitude tree, somatic exercises that the boys do to kind of help regulate stress. But yeah, I don't know, I have even expressed like dad works, you know what I mean? So I'm sure he can't make it to every appointment, that is, so just kind of being realistic about it as well.
You've mentioned a lot already, Stacy, that it sounds like you've got a lot of ideas up your sleeve. It's not everything's going to work or that quickly for what you want to have happen. And a lot is stress management or anger management. What makes you angry? So there's some workbooks. There are children's workbooks on like the angry monster and dealing with anger for children, about when you're not getting what you want and being patient. So that's something else you might want to look into, is dealing with their unmet wishes. There's something called the goals of misbehavior, which is part of parent effectiveness training or active listening training, which is looking at when kids act out, what are their needs and how can we help them get their needs met. If you have the father available at all to try to get them involved, if you don't, it's what are your needs and how are you going to get them met in a different way if you can't get all your needs met from your when you get upset with dad.
So it depends on also like how old the children are and what's being shared,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, like with the parents that's actively in the home, as to how much is being shared with the children too. So that's a part to even look into, like if they're with mom, certain information should not be shared with the kids, as far as like dad not doing his part, but finding other ways that dad can show up to be the dad, and not necessarily like maybe appointments or things like that, but also what's being shared behind the scenes of what's not being brought up in sessions, as to why the kids feel a certain way about what's happening with dad not being there as much as, like, say, mom is.
I agree. Now the kids are 8, so mom's excuse for that will not excuse, but she'll say things like, the boys are old enough to tell time. They're old enough to see text. They know what day and time of the appointment. They know that dad was invited to the appointment. So, the kids are really receptive to knowing why dad's not available.
So they make a point. So Stacy, dad has appointments and is he not showing for the appointed time?
Yeah, he's not showing. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's kind of what I had said before, which, it's it's working with a mom then.
Okay.
Okay, you can make an appointment, but you don't have to you don't always have to tell the kids there's an appointment. So you do some psychoeducation a little bit with the kids about, some people have problems that they have trouble being organized. Maybe your dad's like that, but what do you appreciate about your dad? and try to, like you were talking about the gratitude journal, if there's anything at all that they appreciate about hearing from their dad, then when dad calls, make it a surprise. Mom might know he's supposed to call, and make so she'll have the kids kind of available, but her communication to dad might be, I can't hold the kids around to answer the phone for you for more than an hour if you're going to be calling late. And I'm not telling them you're supposed to call because they need to appreciate that you did. So we're going to make it a surprise that you called. And when you call, don't be surprised if the kids think it's a surprise. And so you tell the kids, hey, guess what? Your dad's on the phone.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. That's a good, I'm going to definitely work with mom more on that.
No, that was an accident. My apologies. I was just listening and I loved Lori's suggestion. So I'm to, put a different emoji and raise my hand instead. But I did want to say I think it is definitely interesting with the doctor's appointment piece, because kids typically don't even want to go to their own appointments, right? And let alone worrying about who's coming to the appointment as well. So I would kind of be interested in figuring out what aspect of dad not being at the appointments is bothering them the most. Essentially, is it that he's not there? Is it that you need extra support? What other ways can he be supportive of you, like you've mentioned previously?
Thanks. The only other resource I would have would be to look at genograms in family therapy. You can looking at sand trade therapy, having kids structure out the family. Well, who do you live with? And maybe that's an inner circle. And then who's on your next level of who you feel close to? And if dad's placed on the third circle out, that's okay.
Yes, thank you.
What's the structure of your family? And if they don't have anybody in, the next level out, maybe it's building those social supports. And the grandparents might even be okay.
Yes, they definitely have a lot of family support, a close uncle that is almost like a father figure. So I have a question. You mentioned there's a workbook for children called Angry Monster.
I might have that title wrong, but if you Google anger management workbook for kids on Amazon, and Angry Monster books, for children.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Yeah, I have some books and that I could run to my bookshelf and show you. I'm still using some really old ones, but because I've been around for over 40 years. But it's the oldies but goodies that I like. But there are some new ones out there.
Oh, Lori, I also ordered the book Double Dip Feelings that you mentioned, because I wanted to share it with the boys on how it's okay to feel two different emotions. You know what I mean?
Right.
More than one emotion towards this, but I haven't received it yet.
Oh, okay. I hope they like it. It's one of my favorites. And the family tree thing, I call it a family tree. You talked about a gratitude tree, instead of doing a genogram, I'll say, let's do a project. And then you bring mom in to do the project for how can we draw a family tree? What do you know about your background? Who was close? Who wasn't close? Did some, and if you make it like a tree, did some of the apples fall off? Oh, that's a shame. you know.
Yes.
Is that tree going to die? No. The talking about trees and children's books, by the way, there's a book called, I think it's by Seligman, The Learning Tree. Okay. And it's really where it takes a boy from childhood all the way to adulthood, where, you know, the poor tree keeps getting chopped up. Everybody familiar with that one? Oh, well, I'll have to.
Wait a minute. Wait. Repeat that last part about the tree getting chopped up.
Oh, there's a famous book.
It's called The Giving Tree
The Giving
by
Tree,
Shel
that's it.
Silverstein.
Yeah, okay, The Giving Tree. You see,
Mhm.
oh, my mind's going. The Giving Tree is one that a lot of people love, and they think it's a children's book, but it's really a book all about that, you know, someone who is being codependent, and, you know, because the tree is codependent on a little boy to feel happy, and that little boy takes and takes and takes. So if you think that A Giving Tree is a children's book, make sure you read it with a lot of discussion. How do you think the tree felt losing all her branches? How do you think the tree felt being left alone? And why did was the tree only happy when the boy was there?
Wow, I never looked at it that way. And it was a favorite book of mine as a kid, and I bought it a couple of years ago because I just wanted to have it in my collection. But I am going to use that when I'm talking with my clients about codependency for sure. Thank you.
I mean, I love the illustrations.
Mhm.
I love that the tree is such a giving, you know, person figure,
Mhm.
and that she's happy being nurturing, but she gave up her whole self and was left as a stump.
And at the end, the little boy sat on the stump. He was a grown old man by that point, and he didn't even
Realize how much
remember.
he depended on the tree, but was still taking from her.
Right, but he didn't even recognize the tree anymore. He just sat on the stump because it was convenient for him, but he didn't know that it was the tree by that point. The tree was unrecognizable. But I also see that tree as kind of like an illustration of parenthood. And maybe I'm doing parenthood wrong. I don't know. But I mean, you know, you give to your child
You do.
and you enjoy it and you love them. And
It is unconditional love, and you give a lot of yourself, but the tree acts, you know, if you don't want to look at it as codependency, you can look at it as, you know, martyr. You know, there are, if you look at Jungian philosophy, the tree's acting like a martyr for her children, and that's not a healthy thing for the mom.
okay.
This was a great discussion of a lot of things. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Lori. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Have a good week.
Have a great week, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.